So our idea we were given this time was about the witches and kind of what they added to Macbeth. So our group initially thought of trying to do kind of now versus then and how the audience would react to it all. So we initially kind of came up with stock characters that we could use. So in Shakespearean times, it was kind of like a man and his wife, a prostitute, a server, a thief, those kind of people. Just because then we could play off them and it could be quite an interesting kind of opening to it also, while the audience may not fully understand, it kind of gives it more context and makes it feel more realistic, I feel like. And then it was very much kind of the context around it as well, which we brought into it. So the fact that people kind of believed in witches and hated them and thought that some of the actors may have actually been witches. And then we cut to kind of modern times and we have the stock characters again, so people that use their phone during the theatre, people that talk all the time during theatre, the kind of obnoxious mother and stuff like that. Again, just to give it a bit more realism. And then in this time, it was kind of like modern interpretations of things that we kind of played off, because there are a lot of modern interpretations of Macbeth that not many people kind of agree with. So in this one, it was the fact that there were 2 witches instead of 3. And then we kind of went on to the idea of kind of women equality and things. So back in those days when Macbeth was saying things about Lady Macbeth being equal, it wouldn't have necessarily been accepted as much then as it is now. The idea that I had while we were rehearsing was possibly the idea of how it would be without the witches, and kind of showing that and how much the witches actually kind of give to the whole play, the fact that without them potentially none of it could have happened. So we did that, and I feel like that worked quite well, of showing that without the witches, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth never would have even tried to kill the king, and none of it would have ever even kind of come across their minds that they could have done that, and that they would have potentially been next in line without the witches kind of putting that idea in their minds. I feel like that's very useful, and I feel like we should definitely do something like that in the actual thing, because for me in year 11, I think I thought about that at the time, but because it was never touched upon, I never knew if that could actually have been a thing or something that I could have argued during the exam. But having someone kind of reinforce that, I think definitely would help. So, well, when we get on to kind of devising the real thing, I feel like that's definitely something we should include. Overall, our performance, I feel like, worked really well. We got a lot of laughs out of it, which shows that humour kind of works, and I feel like a lot of the people were engaged with everything that was going on. We did it fairly fast paced. I feel like we could have done it a little bit faster, cut out a few of the smaller gags that didn't really land as well. But that's just, it was something that we came up in an hour or two, and I feel like for the amount of time that we had, we did quite well with it. We stuck to the brief, which was pretty much only to do with the witches and how they were in the play and what they contributed and everything. So yeah, I feel like there wasn't much we could do to improve for that other than just make it a bit slicker. It could potentially be performance ready if we just went over it a bit more, kind of toned down a little bit of the silliness, especially with some of the movements, especially from Joel with his kind of weird jumpy walking in bit at some bits of it. But yeah, I feel like overall we did really well for that. And I feel like this is the best kind of really short brief thing that we've been given so far. Or at least the best performance we've made out of it. So because of that, I feel like we definitely need to include it when we actually get around to doing it, because it could be very helpful for the students to realise just how important the witches are in this whole play. And potentially if we bring in the idea of Shakespeare, only including it because King James really liked witches. Well, he found he had an interest in them. So bringing that idea kind of brings in the context as well, and potentially allows students to think about what Shakespeare could have done without the witches and how we would have done it. But overall, I think we did really well, and it's definitely something to think about in the future when we get on to doing the real thing.